In this video, we are going to turn this model with a simple texture into a painterly style one. We will duplicate the normals of our mesh, then set up a personalized brush, paint the normals, use them to create color and roughness variations, and as final touch, make a geometry nodes and material setup for the outline. This setup works for both Eevee and cycles with just small variations into the final result. To follow this tutorial, you can use a project of your own or download this demo file from Gumroad. If you do download the file, please consider a small donation. It will support the channel and encourage me to produce more content like this. So introduction being done, let's get started. As mentioned at the beginning of this video, we're gonna use the normals painting technique here. The problem of this technique is that sometimes you already have some normals on your mesh that define some little details. Like in this case, if I disconnect my normals from the material, I lose some little details, and this is something I don't want to. For this reason, we will create a duplicate copy of the normals, we will paint them, and then we will combine the painted version with the unpainted one. This way we have full control on how these two are interacting. For this, go to shader editor, select your normals image node, and then duplicate it together with the normal map node, Shift D. So once you are done, make sure the duplicated copy here is selected, then open up an image editor somewhere. I have it here in the top corner. Go to Image menu and click on Save As. Okay, you change the name, use something that is pretty obvious, like painted normals. Okay, save as image. And now make sure that here you have normals base. Okay, and here make sure you have painted normals instead. And once you are sure they are different, make sure you change the name. The point is that even if you save it in the folder with a different name, if the image has been created inside Blender and it has some kind of personalized name over here, it will keep this name and maybe add a PNG 001 at the end. As you can see here, you have just normal base, and here we have normal base PNG 001. Okay, so we know this is the copy. But we need to be sure because we don't want to paint on the original ones. So here, make sure to also change the internal name you have in Blender. Painted normals. Okay, so we are pretty sure these two are different. And also, while selecting these two, make sure the node is set to non-color. As you can see, when we have reselected the normal base image, the color space have been automatically changed to RGB. So we open up the drop-down menu here and select non-color. Now we're good to go with these two guys. And now we have to mix them. For this, we're gonna use the mix node. So let's click on Shift A, search, mix, and we use mix color. Okay, and we plug the original normals inside the A and the ones that should be painted inside the B, and then we can connect this result to normal. For now, this shouldn't make any difference on the model itself because for now the normals are identical, but this is our setup, and now we're ready to paint the normals. So let's bring down the shader editor here, bring this a bit up. Before we start actually painting, let's create the brush for painting. As basis, we're gonna use the Paint Pixel brush. So let's select this, right click, and click on Duplicate Asset. So save, let's go to Textures. And here, make sure you select brush mask because we don't need colors. We need just the outline. So here, let's click on new, and here, open up the file browser and let's select this irregular brush 03. This is a stiff image, so you actually shouldn't need any extra setup. Just make sure the alpha is disabled, or you can also enable alpha, but make sure you also enable calculate. I will disable everything. Now let's make sure to set up the behavior. Here I will set it to rake, and let's go to solid mode for a second to see what happens if we paint. Okay, so this is our brush rotation, and I don't really like it. I want it to be rotated by 90 degrees. So it's vertical. Okay, this way. And now let's set up the color. For the color setup, we can go simply to 3D viewport. Doesn't matter if you're in solid viewport shading or in material preview. Shift X, and Blender will sample the color from whatever texture is selected as active texture over here. So if I have the base yellow color selected texture, I Shift X and it samples yellow. But if I have the normals selected, painted normals, I go Shift X and the color selected is the normals color. Make sure you sample the color from a neutral place where you don't have like any bumps or similar stuff. This way you are sure you have the neutral normals color as basis. So we have sampled our normals color. Then let's go back to material preview. Now we're gonna use the randomize color function. Let's enable it. It has hue, saturation, and value. This bar controls the amount of the randomization. So for example, if I have this color selected, let's go to solid mode to see what happens on the normals, and I set hue to 1, and you can see that the color is being randomized quite a lot. If I set it to 0.21, the variation is more subtle. For now, I'm gonna keep it around 0.5. And then other two options we have here allow us to set up the randomization for single brush strokes. So what I mean, so basically by default you paint it and you have many little brush strokes here, which could be nice, but this is not exactly what I need. So if I click here, the randomization is limited to the single brush strokes. By the way, I think this randomization is a bit extreme, so let's lower it down. And then one more thing we can enable is the control of randomization amount basing on the pressure sensitivity. So if I enable this and maybe set this to, I don't know, something a bit higher, 0.6, if I press just a little, as you can see, the hue gets randomized just a little, even if the amount here is pretty high. But as soon as I start pressing a lot, the randomization becomes pretty extreme. This is something that can be handy, but for now I think I'm not going to use it. So let's lower down the hue a bit and then disable the pressure sensitivity here. One more thing I want to do is changing the icon so I can distinguish this from the regular paint pixel brush. Once everything is set up, I just go here and click on Save Changes to Asset. And we're good to go and be ready to paint. So make sure you're in the texture painting mode. Also make sure you get back to the material preview mode, and let's start painting. So after some testing, I think we can lower down the strength, enable pressure sensitivity for it, and then enable also pressure sensitivity for the size, and maybe make the brush a bit bigger. I also tested the brush a bit with the pressure sensitivity enabled for the hue, and also with the hue set to a higher value. But in the end, I think we can stick to something like 0.4 and disable the pressure sensitivity. Okay, looks good. I think we can do a few brush strokes here and there just to start. And then what we're gonna do is also saving the normal space color just in case. And let's save again changes to the brush. Save changes. Then let's do some more brush strokes here and there. For now, I'm not gonna paint everything and everywhere. I just making some brush strokes here and there, and make sure I also like add brush strokes on top of the normals I already have, because this way I have a reference of them interacting together to tweak the mix node a bit. So okay, this is what we have. Let's check the normals. Okay, I think they look good. We feel like we need some more variations in some areas, just increase the value a bit. Okay, I think we have some brush strokes to start tweaking a bit more the material. So let's go again to the shader editor. Now that we have our normal setup working nicely, we can add even more variations through the roughness and the colors of our whale. And for this, we're gonna use the exact same normal map we just have painted. We're just gonna convert that using color ramp. So now let's make ourselves some more space. We can shrink the brushes for a moment and maybe this here, and then let's zoom out a little bit. And the first thing we're gonna do here is duplicating the painted normals node. Not like we really need a copy of it. We could like just bring the connections from here, but since it's pretty far away, let's create a copy anyway to have it closer. Shift D. And then with this node selected, press Alt P, so you make sure to get it out of this frame here. And let's create some color variations, since this is the variations that will have most impact visually. Let's duplicate this color ramp here, so we don't have to search for a new one. And let's connect it to the normals, so we turn them black and white. Why do we need to turn them black and white? Because we're gonna use them as a mask to separate the color variations here. So here we have the base color that basically looks like this, and what I'm gonna do is creating another variation of this with some darker tones. And for this I'm gonna use the hue saturation node. With Shift A, let's find the hue saturation value. Let's connect it somewhere over here. Maybe let's add in a mix node already. So Shift A, mix color. Let's place it over here. And this one we're gonna plug into the B, and the original color without variations we're gonna plug into the A. This way we can quickly like compare them. Right now there is no difference because we haven't added anything to the hue saturation value node. And what I want to do here is bringing down the value to something like 0.4, 0.5, something like this. And then let's increase the saturation just a bit and maybe change the hue a bit, but not too much. Maybe the hue we can make like, let's press Shift to change it very subtly. 49. So let's check the difference. Like this is pretty dark and this is pretty bright. But I think this is a bit too saturated, so let's bring down the saturation just a tiny bit. Okay, I think we're good to go. And now instead of like separating these two colors with the factor, let's simply plug the color ramp over here. Now we don't really see any kind of result because it's too strong. This we can see by holding Ctrl Shift and clicking on the node. And by the way, this only works if you have the node wrangler enabled. So if it's not working, just make sure you have enabled this add-on from the properties panel. So let's experiment a bit till we clearly can see the brush strokes. Something like that should work for now. Let's see how it looks when we plug it inside the principled BSDF. And let's unplug the normals so they don't confuse us. We just see the effect we have from the color for now. So maybe we can make it even stronger, like something like this. Okay, I think something like this works pretty well. So now that we have this stuff here, let's also create the roughness variations. So for this, we're gonna use again this normal map, and I think we could even avoid duplicating it. So simply let's create a duplicate copy of color ramp again, and since this is pretty close, we can just, let's maybe shift right click and add a little dot, like so. So it looks a bit less confusing. Anyway, here again, let's take the mix node, and this goes here, and this goes here. And by the way, let's first check what we have over here. And again, this is too strong. Let's make it a bit more subtle, maybe a bit brighter. Let's try to see what happens if we invert the... Okay, here they look a bit better. So we have a gray background, and yes, I think this should look good. Let's see how this impacts the roughness without any other variations. So I detached the color as well. So I have just principled BSDF, and of course let's connect the simple color. So this kind of subtle variations are pretty fine for the roughness. So let's connect this back and reconnect this to the general roughness thing. And of course, to mix them nicely, we need to bring down the factor just a bit. So, okay, this way we have the mixage of the two roughness maps. So let's connect the normals back again, and also the color variations. So we can see how all these things look combined together. I think they look good, and the normals also are pretty strong. So let's bring them a bit down, like so. So this way we have some really nice variations that doesn't look too strong. Let's make them even stronger. Okay, so for now, this is a good start. By the way, we can even test this out and see what happens if we make the roughness very, very strong. As you can see, the brushstrokes are more evident this way, but that's not really what I want. Maybe make it something in the middle. Yes, I think this way it looks nice. So let's get back to painting. Before adding any new brush strokes, make sure you have selected the painted normal texture. You can select it from the shader directly or simply from here. Here we have two painted normals, but they actually are the same texture. It's just because we have duplicated the node, and basically Blender here lists all the image nodes you have over here. And now we can actually get back to painting. By the way, whenever you see these kind of lines, that might happen because these are the points where you have the UV seams. So if we go to edit mode, you can see we have them here, here, and here. When painting the normals, this can result in these lines. The solution I use here is simply getting back and avoiding to make brush strokes on the seam spots directly. Like if you haven't saved the texture yet, just hover your mouse over the image editor and press Alt R to reset the texture. And if you can't reset the texture, you simply disable the randomized color and paint this spot back with the normal color. Make sure the strength is set to 1 and the pressure sensitivity is disabled. And you just paint it back with the simple normal colors. It looks good now, as you can see. And then when you re-enable the randomized color and the strength, make sure you avoid painting over this part here. You just make it in a way that the seam is not evident. Something you can do to work more quickly is setting the basic normals color as secondary color. You can just simply color pick it from the primary color, and then when pressing Control, it acts like erase brush or something like that, and that's because the randomization isn't applied to it. So basically, if you check it from here, when I press Ctrl and start painting, you can see that the color isn't being randomized. While if I start painting normally, we have the randomization back. Here, where I have some UV seams and I start seeing the seam a bit while painting, I can slightly erase it with the secondary color without changing anything over here and disabling the randomize color option. I can simply press Ctrl and erase the spots I want. If you want to learn how to build complex 3D, 2D painterly style scenes in Blender, this course by Grafit Cube School is totally for you. I recently discovered them and I fell in love with their style. I mean, look at this onion. I couldn't even imagine an onion could look cool and inspiring. Well, looks like it can. You will learn how to build painterly scenes and cool assets from scratch. The course will start from the basics and guide you through the whole pipeline. You will learn how to plan, model, shade, paint, add grease pencil parts, VFX, composite, and render out your animated 2.5D scenes. You can check the students' results. They look insane. The course is early access right now with 40% off discount, so hurry up before they put it at full price. All the info and links in description. And now let's get back to our painterly whale. Okay, I think now I'm done with the painting process, so since we're done, I can lower down the normals even more. So something like this, because I actually want this effect to be a bit more subtle. Something like this works fine for me. Now that we're done with our brush strokes, One last thing we need to add is the setup for the outline. We're gonna use a mix of a geometry node setup and a material with transparent brush strokes on it. So first of all, let's create the material with the transparent brush strokes. And for this, let's enable the fake user for our original material here. And let's temporarily remove it from the material slots. Why I am enabling the fake user, even if we are bringing back this material at some point to the slots, we need this because if Blender crashes or we forget about it and just close it, we're gonna lose this material if it doesn't have any users. So make sure you enable this. And then click on cross to remove it temporarily, and then click on new to create our transparent brush strokes. And now let's create an image. So Shift A, search image texture, connect color to the base color socket and alpha to the alpha socket. And then click on new. And this time I'm gonna use 2K because we don't really need any high quality thing, even if it's slightly pixelated, we don't really care about this. And very important, make sure the alpha here is enabled because otherwise the transparency won't work for the image. So click on new image and then select it here, click here. So it opens up inside the image editor. And then here inside the image editor, go to image and click on save as and save it somewhere. And here as well, when saving, make sure you have not RGB but RGBA enabled, which means you also have the alpha channel here. So save as image and we are good to go. Now we need to make this completely transparent, and for that we're going to use the fill tool, and inside the brush settings, let's change the blend from mix to erase alpha. And here it doesn't really matter the color you have chosen for that. And to make it transparent, we can actually directly click here, but this will leave the whole image outside of UV's black, which is not a big deal, but if you use the smear tool and so on, it could leak inside the UVs. So since I want everything to be transparent here, make sure you enable paint and you just click inside the image editor like so. And this way you have the whole image texture with transparency. Now that everything is transparent, we can switch to our paintbrush. Make sure you disable the randomize color option, and then let's choose something between dark yellow and orange as primary color, and as secondary color let's use white. So simply bring the saturation to 0. So now we're ready, and let's paint a few brush strokes. If you feel like not seeing the subject is a bit annoying, you can just detach the alpha channel temporarily from this. This way you're gonna see the transparent parts as black and the parts which are not transparent as yellow, like so. So let's do this so we have brush strokes almost everywhere. And also while painting the brush strokes, make sure you leave some empty spaces here and there. You need to have some transparent parts. And then if you want to erase something, you feel like there's too much color, use the erase card or any other erase brush. And yeah, I think we're good to go. So let's bring back the transparency here. Yes, maybe some more color here. Oh, and I just realized that I wanted to use the white color on the bottom part. That's why I have set up the white color as well. So maybe let's add a few white brush strokes too. Now we're actually good to go. And we can save. If I press Ctrl S, this message appears and you click on save. Now we need to bring back our original material to our whale. So let's go in the properties panel to the material section and make sure again you enable this shield icon here. This way, if we close Blender before bringing back this painted material, we don't lose it. And then we just remove it and open up here all the materials we have and select our original texture we have made at the beginning of this video. And once done, now we need to place our transparent texture we just created on top of this. And for this, let's go to the geometry nodes. And let's create a geometry nodes setup. So let's click on new and here add a set position node. Set position. Place it like so. So this way it keeps the original shape and then we can join the original shape with the new one. And for this we also need the join geometry node. So Shift A to open the search bar and then join geometry. So this way our duplicated geometry will be joined to the original one. And now we're gonna take our mesh copy and we're gonna offset its dimensions. And instead of trying to do the right thing with these three values and trying to find a combination, we're gonna use the scale node and we're gonna plug that here inside the offset value. And then here, to tell Blender to scale the model along the normals, we're gonna also plug the normal input and connect it to the vector. And of course, the value of 1 is a little too much, so let's pick something more reasonable, maybe 0.02, and I think this is fine. And now that we have set up the scale, we need to add the new material to this scaled copy, and for this we can use the, let's bring this a bit to the side, we can use the set material node and plug it here. And here we can choose any material we like, and we're gonna choose this one, transparent brushstrokes. And as you can see, our brushstrokes have been already placed on top of our main material, but what we need is to actually see this material only on the outline part. How we can make the outline only visible? The common trick here is to create first inverted normal just for the shell of your object. In geometry nodes, we can do this by adding the flip faces node. Let's add it somewhere here or here. It doesn't really matter. And then let's get back to the shader editor, and here we can add the brushstrokes material to the material slots. This won't change anything on our mesh, we just add it so we can easily edit the shader. So here let's make some space and add with Shift A transparent shader and then mix shader, here you go. And then here connect this as first shader and this as second shader. And then as factor to divide this two, we're gonna use the back facing value that comes from our geometry. So back facing, and we plug it here. And as you can see, as result, now we can only see the outliner. This way we told Blender to make the back faces of a mesh transparent, and normally the back faces of a mesh are the ones that point to the inside, but since we have inverted the normals with geometry nodes, now our back faces are the ones that are pointing to the outside. And this means that the front part of the shell copy is transparent, while the internal part is visible. And the internal part, we see it as outliner because we first see the original material and then the brushstrokes material. I hope it's clear. I know it sounds complicated. So now we're basically done, and if we like, we can in texture paint mode, making sure we have brushstrokes, transparent image enabled, we can add some more transparencies here and there. We always have the possibility to add changes. And one more thing is that our outliner at the moment, everything looks good inside the material preview, but if we go to the cycles preview, we can see these strange shadows, and these are the shadows of our transparent material strokes. To fix that, we can duplicate the mix shader and the transparent shader with Shift D, then add this here, and inside the factor, let's maybe move the principled and this a bit to the back. This we can plug here, and as factor, we're gonna use the shadow ray. So Shift A, shadow ray, and plug this into the factor, and this way, as you can see, we don't see the shadows anymore. And in cycles, as you can see, also the back facing isn't perfect. You still can see a few brush strokes here and there, but I actually don't mind that. I like this kind of effect, so it's good for me. By the way, a similar result you can achieve through the solidify modifier, but I personally prefer using the geometry nodes because you can then also animate the scale through an additional node setup. So for example, here I can add the frame node, and now it explodes. So let's maybe add a matte node this way, and then this we can make pretty high, and instead of add we use divide. Okay, and to preview what we are doing, if you press play, you can see that as soon as the frame changes, it starts growing. But we don't need it to grow, actually. We need it to like dance. So let's add a few more nodes. And first of all, let's bring these two a bit back and add a noise texture. And here we will use 4D noise, and instead of plugging the value into vector, we will plug it here. And as you can see now, we have much better effect, but of course it's not enough. So here, to have more control of what happens, let's also add a map range node, like so. And here, the max value, we set it to 0.02 or 5, something close to our initial value we used for the outline. So let's see how it looks. Okay, now it's not very clear. We can see it's moving, and this is basically the effect we want. But one more thing I like to set up is using not just the linear interpolation, but the stepped linear interpolation. This way it looks more similar to the stop motion animation. I set the roughness to a higher value, and here I maybe increase the from max value a bit. You can see the noise becomes a bit more evident. Maybe let's zoom in so you can see it better. And this way I already like it, and you can increase or decrease the steps, maybe don't overdo this. And of course we can increase the maximum value to make the line thicker, but I think I'll go with the 0.05 value. Of course, you can adjust all these setups to your liking, and we're done. If you got to the end of this video, leave me a whale emoji in the comments. Of course, likes are also very welcome. Thank you for watching, and see you in my next video.